Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I have unfortunately been dealing with what my wife likes to refer to as the man flu. You kind of take for granted, Nick, being able to breathe out of both nostrils until you can't. So it's been some rough nights sleeping, trying to figure out how to manage to breathe, but I think I'm mostly over it now. But last week, it was a little rough for me, Nick.
Well, you were missed, and for those who've had the man flu, can really understand what you've been through, Chris. So I'm here to support you any way I can. But look, well, you were missed, but you sound much better today than what I heard from you last week. So onwards and upwards.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, I'm getting to an age, I found that the weather really impacts me. So I basically get sick every year when it goes from summer to fall, and then when it goes from winter to spring, when you get those big temperature changes, just something about my body can't handle it anymore.
Well, the older you get, the harder it gets, Chris. And the question you got to make is how much you complain. I complain less and less, and just accept the fact that I feel everything. If I have one extra beer, I feel it. If I have a little bit of a sniffle, I feel it feels harder and harder to deal with. But anyway, we're not here to moan about our health. Otherwise, we're fighting fit.
Yeah, of course. We're going to fight through it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I was at a wedding on Saturday with Nick. Some great stories. We won't go into the podcast, but maybe when you're visiting over in London, I'll tell you about the mother-in-law Zilla. I know bridezilla is the common term, but the mother-in-law Zilla that popped up at the wedding. I did try to kill some of my illness by consuming alcohol, because alcohol kills germs. Whether that was successful or not, I don't know, Nick.
Well, you're looking great today, so I think it worked. I think it worked a treat. I used to use rum or whiskey as my two ports of call whenever I was unwell, and led to some great nights and also some disastrous mornings. So onwards and upwards with the alcohol front as well, whenever it can do some damage for you.
Well, in my illness, I unfortunately did not get the chance to partake in the interview that we did, or you did last week, with our good friend David Gandler, the CEO at Fubo, someone that has been on the podcast a few times. We appreciate David because there's not many senior executives that are willing to speak as openly and candidly as he is compared to others. It feels like quite frequently when you speak to people, and this isn't to be a criticism, we understand how it works. There's a lot of PR teams involved. There's a bit of can't talk about this, won't touch that, or polish up answers. But it's always really nice to have David come in and give some really transparent honesty onto how he just feels about things are going. So maybe, Nick, without giving away too much of the podcast, just a little bit of a summary of your conversation last week.
Absolutely. Well, Fubo TV is a platform that we've all been following their journey for a number of reasons over the last few years. The virtual MVPD market in the America and what's been happening there has been something that's caught the attention of a lot of people, both within the US and outside of it, mainly because it's effectively trying to act as a cable replacement service, and seems to be continuing to gain traction and momentum, albeit at a constant and steady pace. And David, because obviously Fubo TV is listed on the stock exchange, he's also very public at sharing the numbers, which gives us more of a contextual setting of how the business is performing, rather than what you might get in some organizations which can just be lost in PR speak, as you were referring to there. So David has the numbers that come out that can back up what he's talking about, referring to. So we had a lot to talk about. Fubo's journey continues to evolve and progress. And then we've got this whole Venu Sports situation that's been playing out since when I spoke to him must be 6 months ago, actually, almost today, at New York, where we talked about the Venu Sports initiative between Warner Brothers Discovery, Disney, and Fox, what it meant for the industry and what it actually meant for him and for Fubo TV. That's progressed a lot since then with the injunction. Basically, Fubo TV won the injunction that came out a couple of weeks ago now, meaning that the court case is going to progress, and there's a lot more to happen on it, and which we dig into in the podcast to talk about what the journey is ahead for Fubo TV on that front, what it means to get this injunction in place, and indeed how he sees both the performance of Fubo TV shaping and indeed the wider sports media landscape. So, always good to talk about a lot of those things. And we also talk about pricing, which has become a big thing, obviously, with how some of these services, whether they be the big major media businesses, or the sports services like Sunday Ticket, which we talked about a few weeks back, what does that all mean for consumers? So Yeah, great to have David back on to talk about some of those things and give us a bit of a sense of what's next from his front.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the injunction. I believe he said in the recording that that begins on October 8th. It actually begins a little bit earlier on October 6th. So that is a story we have been following and will continue to follow. And October 6th is the day with which that will kick off to the next stages. But yeah, like you said, it's always very interesting to hear from Dave. He's always got great opinions. And like I said, his transparency is very much valued and appreciated here. So without further ado, Nick, we'll hand things over to you.
So, David, there's never a dull day in the media industry. I think I used a similar line with you last time we spoke, but not only is there never a dull day in the media industry, there's never a dull day in sports. And looking from outside in to what's happening at Fubo, it seems there's never a dull day at your headquarters as well. So,
that's what I was going to
say. Be joining us.
Thank you.
Look, great to catch up. Obviously, a lot's been happening on your side. I mean, looking from afar, not only you've got the business side to manage and make sure you continue the growth that you're projecting and discussing a lot when you're having your earnings calls with shareholders. But of course, you have this little Venu Sports injunction that's going on along the side, which is obviously getting a lot of headlines and a lot of coverage. Obviously, the latest on that from what we've seen is the injunction was passed and Venu Sports is being basically put on hold for the moment. And the next stage is set to take forth in that proceedings or that case. So can you just give us the latest? What is the latest from that current situation from your lens?
Yeah, I think, we spoke before the case began, and, I've been extremely bullish and optimistic about our chances. I think everyone I spoke to thought that it was extremely unlikely. But then again, I think everyone says everything is extremely unlikely as it relates to Fubo, whether it's competing, it's this lawsuit. But the bar is actually very high for a preliminary injunction. But I think the one thing that most people don't understand, everyone thinks we sort of gave ourselves a little bit more room. But if you read the judge's ruling, I mean, she was very clear. She said that we will substantially succeed on the merits, which means that you really need a sound legal argument. You need to have credible witnesses, and you need to have strong supporting evidence. And I believe we delivered that in the PI, which is the reason why she ruled in favor of this injunction. And, clearly she believes that we have a solid case when we actually go to trial. I believe the trial date now is set for sometime in early October. I believe it might be even October 8th of 2025. So, we feel really good about that. We had a very narrow discovery that related specifically to Venu, but obviously there are other areas in which that we're going to be very focused on as we expand discovery. So I feel very good about our chances. Again, our team did a phenomenal job. If you're talking to anybody, any third party who was at the trial, I think it's clear how strong our management team is. It's clear how credible our witnesses were. And, obviously we would like to get this behind us so we can focus solely on the business. But at this moment in time, I think this is a very important juncture, not only for us, but for the whole industry and for consumers who we are obviously fighting for.
One of the things that came out of the stories and articles off the back of the injunction taking place was about what's the next stage. And part of that is the conversation around further discovery around the processes that are going on behind the scenes. Your point has been not only about the monopolistic nature that this could play out, but also the way that these organizations are negotiating carriage deals and with people like yourself and with other parties. One of the things that you've said is you're going to be sharing more details around how those negotiations take place and with these organizations. Right. I mean, that's obviously a huge part of the industry that sort of doesn't actually get talked a lot about. What can you share with us about, I know it's obviously tricky being a legal case, but what are you going to be sharing there that you think is going to make the case about the way that they are acting in those instances isn't fair for creating an anti-competitive environment, I suppose?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to provide too much information because, as you can imagine, the defendants will be building their case. And my learning from the last trial is they looked at every tweet, every email, every interview. They actually listened to the interview that you posted between the two of us. So what I will say is that there seem to be, in my view, subjectively, negotiations that are in some cases potentially negotiated in bad faith. And I think again, subjectively, we'll have the experts chime in on this at the right time. But these MFNs, as we call them, or most favored nation clauses, we think those have been used in a very pernicious manner versus a true MFN, which I guess there are probably two sides of the story. The first is that it's a good way to keep prices down, which obviously hasn't happened. As you've seen, prices continue to go up. There continue to be more disputes. Or, which in the way that I believe we've experienced this firsthand, is that those MFNs have been used to synthetically inflate prices. And without getting into more detail on that, I think those are kind of the two arguments, the two sides. Defendants and plaintiffs will probably, try and kind of demonstrate, where the value is on the MFN side. But I believe we have a very, very strong case.
So David, one of the parts of the case is the fact that you're having to pay. They're forcing you to pay for channels and content you don't want as part of these deals. Can you just give us an explanation of what that looks like in practice? Because I think some people don't quite understand from outside in how they can really pull those sorts of levers.
So I think what I said, if memory serves me correctly, was that we are forced to buy unwanted channels to access must-have sports programming. So what that means is I can give you a couple examples, maybe one for each defendant, just to show that we're equal opportunity. On the Warner Brothers side, for instance, if you wanted to buy just Turner Networks or TBS, the way that they wanted to sell it to Venu, then you'd have to buy all the other 27 channels, the Discovery Network and CNN and Food Network, Travel Channel, HGTV, etc. If it's Fox, maybe you just wanted the Fox Broadcast Network and Fox Sports 1 and 2, for instance, or Fox Soccer Plus, but you'd have to acquire Fox News. So, and then on the Disney side, it's the same thing. If you wanted just all of the, ESPN networks, you would be forced into taking, Disney Junior, Disney XD, FX, Nat Geo. So this obviously adds a lot of cost. And we've never been allowed to disaggregate, these channels. And all of a sudden they decided that they came up with this really innovative idea 10 years later, that they wanted to sort of provide themselves this type of flexibility to offer a service that, by the way, as I said this before, they would be the sole provider of this service. So they're vertically integrated companies. They have decided to collude together to build a service and give themselves exclusivity for some period of time. Now, I don't know, again, I wasn't privy to some of the other testimony because, obviously it was closed to everybody. But, my sense is that they also gave themselves preferential pricing. That's my sense, subjective. I can't say for sure, but I can't imagine they gave themselves the same pricing they gave us for a service that would start with 0 subscribers. So the whole thing is just, it's clear it's anti-competitive. And, the point of antitrust law is very simple. It's to prevent the abuse of market power, right? That's number one. The second thing is to encourage innovation. How can you encourage innovation? They claim this is a very innovative product, but it's only innovative because they've stifled the rest of us. We've been trying to do this, as you know, since the beginning of streaming. And we've been told that, no, you can't do it. So, and then the last thing, it's really about protecting consumers. I think those are kind of the three main points that I would say. And protecting consumers means lower prices and higher quality, right? And if you're the sole provider of a service, there's never going to be a lower price. And you're not really incentivized to, create a service is high quality or innovative. Yes, you'll do your best, but you're not going to do it as quickly as possible because there are competing forces in the market. So for those reasons, I think this is very clear. Frankly, I'm surprised at the lack of awareness as it relates to this subject across the industry that this is bad. But I think people are starting to finally understand what's happening.
Well, one of the things that has evolved over time is, and particularly with the proliferation of streaming, is our ability to have data and insight as to what works and what doesn't when it comes to consumption, when it comes to driving acquisition of customers or eyeballs, conversion on advertising, etc. So now more than ever, you're able to quantify what is driving value to you as a platform. And we've seen that in a host of other countries and markets as well, where just from a sports only lens, you start to see someone like Comcast owns Sky will be much more picky with who they invest in on rights rather than just picking up a whole host of, say, sports rights. They will just say, well, we'll pick the ones that move the needle on subscribers,
Right.
and we won't spend on the others, but we'll give you some free exposure to these tier 2, tier 3
Correct.
sports, but we don't need you to drive business value here because we know the Premier League is the thing that drives value in the UK. And in this, I see some similarities in what you're suggesting here is like, that those channels they're not giving you, they're charging you for, aren't going to move necessarily the needle. Not to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that's the case that certain channels just do not move the needle from an audience engagement perspective. And if you're trying to make sure your subscription costs your acquisition cost and your subscription cost per user you can run a successful and profitable business, you can't really do that if you're paying for unwanted costs. And I think that's ultimately the challenge the whole industry has faced when we've been looking at growth for so long, to now be focused much more on profitability. And then you have to be counting every penny and every dollar you can to make sure you can make the event business as profitable as possible, so it has a sustainable and long-term future. So there's no real question in that, David, but I guess that sort of aligns with what you're, obviously from your own lens, from Fubo. The objective here is to make sure that you're on a level playing field, and ultimately Fubo has a long-term sustainable growth-like future ahead of it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, our goal was just to be able to compete, as you said, on a level playing field on a non-exclusive basis. I mean, we have been doing this for a long time. We've been called by the defendants a weak competitor. My credibility has been called into question. But the reality is, if we're a weak competitor, why are you required to partner together and give yourselves, I should say, rights that you won't provide anyone else at a price that you believe is the right price? And so, but I think what we've done, and I'm very proud of the company and the team, for the history of cable, you can fact check this, Nick, but the companies with the lowest NPS scores of any industry have been cable providers, right? And you ask yourself, why is that the case, right? I mean, they have customer service, they spend lots of money, they do marketing, they build a beautiful, Sky IQ box or Sky Q box, and which is built off of the Comcast platform initially. And you say, well, why is that? And the programmer has always been the good guy, I think, historically. What we've essentially done is we've highlighted the fact that programmers are not actually acting in the best interest of consumers, and we've sort of flipped the story on its head. And today, a company like DirecTV is, I believe people support DirecTV for its actions. So this is something that would be unrealistic, 3-4 years ago. It would be big bad, Comcast, big bad DirecTV. But I think we've exposed, sort of the true character of what is happening, and you can see across the board, whether it's plus services, where plus services in many cases prices have gone up. I think I mentioned on the Disney Plus side, 100% in 4 years, just doubled. I mean, think about that, right? And it's clear that they're acting as predators. But again, for us, it's really about ensuring that we can compete and provide consumers the best product we possibly can. And if we lose, then so be it. I mean, we should lose, right? But I think that in this country, it's very important that there's robust industry. And, tell me why there's no company other than Fubo that has entered, the market. Hulu, owned by Disney, right? YouTube, obviously Google will enter any and every market because of its monopoly power, but that's a sort of a separate podcast, I would say, which I'm probably not the best one to talk about that. But, and then there's us, really, and then you have two satellite providers that are basically leveraging, Dish and DirecTV, which are leveraging their parent rates to be able to build a business. So it just seems to me incredible that there are no new players that have been able to succeed, including Sony PlayStation, if you recall. They just couldn't do it. And I believe they also went to Washington several years ago. But this is why, Fubo is different. We are persistent, we are resilient, and we are here today to ensure that, there's a level playing field. We'll do our best, at least, to do that.
One of the things that stood out for me, David, is obviously you've taken on this this challenge, this case because of the reasons you've talked about already. Have you had any support from other media companies or companies similar nature, whether it's official or behind closed doors on the phone, to show their support for what you're trying to do? Because it looks from outside in that you're sort of sitting there almost by yourselves trying to take on three major media powers who are have created this monopolistic market. Are you getting at least support from others, whether it's in any sort of official capacity?
Yeah, well, let me start a little bit further back. So I think when we started this process, everyone thought, here we go again, little Fubo taking on something that they can't possibly do. And we went to Washington. It was my first meeting there. And I was told, where is everybody else if this is such an important issue? I don't see anyone behind you. And so we said, we tried to explain to, several offices in DC that, folks are scared. Different executives are scared to say anything. I don't blame them. I mean, I've said this, Nick, before. I'm probably never going to get a job in media. So I'm probably the only guy that could possibly take on a fight like this. But, over, several weeks after multiple meetings, we've had, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 public advocacy groups back us, which, that's not an easy task in and of itself. We've had, folks from Congress like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Congressman Castro and Nadler. We feel like we've gotten enough behind us, but from a industry perspective, I think we've gotten a lot of, text and meetings that I went to with people that they were just like, look, it's great that you're doing this, but unfortunately, we can't publicly support you. We tried to get some of these groups to go to DC and privately speak. I think maybe 1 or 2 may have gone in, but they haven't told us exactly when and where and how. But I think as of today, as you can see, I mean, you have DirecTV that's fighting the good fight now. They've also filed a complaint with the FCC regarding some bad faith arguments. Again, I haven't read the documentation on it. I just saw sort of the headlines. And I think we've emboldened a lot of distributors to not be scared. They can follow in our footsteps. And again, once more, we lead the market in something like this. So I'm hoping that you'll see more distributors and more broadcasters, affiliate groups, station groups really step up, because it really is if you never get in trouble for anything, you're going to keep pushing the envelope. And I think this is the only industry that has never testified at Congress. Never came to a hearing. So we have Elon Musk going to hearings. We have Satya Nadella going to hearings, Mark Zuckerberg. When have you seen any of the executives from these top media companies ever go into a hearing and explain themselves? It's never happened. So if that's our job for now, that's what we're going to do. Obviously, our goal is not to be litigators. We're not professional litigators. We're fighting for truth, and we're fighting for a fair playing field. And I wish this could all end sooner and we could just all agree to be friends. And just, again, they say we're small. So obviously we don't play much of an impact, on their P&L. So why not just give us what everyone else has, use the real MFN, and let's call it a day. And let's get the same pricing, because how could we be the only ones that have half the bundle and are not profitable and have the same price? I mean, you don't have to be a judge. You don't have to be a jury. Just anyone can look at this math and say, this makes no sense. How is this possible? So that's what we're fighting for.
So one of the things we're seeing, you've talked a lot about pricing. And one of the things we have seen, not only with some of the major players in the media market that you've talked about, but as even the more dedicated sports-specific packages like NFL Sunday Ticket going up astronomically in price through YouTube's new proposition, with a lot of new extra features to the mix. But we're talking cost between nearly $500 up to $700 plus if you go through the Apple platform, which obviously they take their own little cut of nearly 30%, I think, or so on top of that. But just generally, what's your thoughts about even some of these products that are single sport specific now going to these sorts of levels? We're talking, the NFL season's just over 4 months, 4.5 months long, charging $500 seems like a pretty huge number. The case I see here is that they are adding a lot more features to the mix. So it isn't just about the broadcast anymore. It's about adding all these extra layers of multi-screen experiences, interactivity, data points, etc. But do you think those costs are justified?
I think that's a very difficult subject for me to opine on. I have a view as a consumer that might, I would say, differ from my view as an operator in this industry. As a consumer, I would say at some point it's unrealistic to subscribe to any of these services. And people will eventually, just like they used to go to bars, you'll see them going back to bars. You'll see them going to their friend's house. You'll see them, splitting these, services so they can watch together, one Saturday at my house, one Saturday at your house. It's getting very expensive. And it's kind of sad because, the Americans are sports fans. And for it to be cost prohibitive, I think it would be a huge mistake. I also think that there are other revenue implications here, negative revenue implications, that if you just don't reach enough people, you can't sell ads, you can't sell sponsorships. And, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind, meaning that people quickly start to say, well, can't get access to this. I have this 2-hour window. I'll, read about it on my phone. I'll look at the data analytics on it. I'll follow it on my, phone when you can just watch, follow the game match by play by play. But, it would be a shame if it continues to, prices continue to increase. I mean, hopefully the leagues can figure out a way to manage cost. Obviously, players are expensive and you want the best players on your team. You want to win. Everybody wants to win and sell merchandising and all kinds of things and increase ticket sales. But I think if you just look at, again, this is not for any league. Like if you just look at ticket sales, right? Just the average cost of a ticket, I'll say in the tri-state area, I don't want to say which city specifically in New York, for instance, but if you want to have a family, if you have a spouse, you and 2 kids, and you wanted to go to a game, doesn't matter, basketball game, a hockey game, you're going to be tickets that are, I would say, pretty good tickets. You're looking at, let's just say $100 a seat. It's $400 there. Price of a hot dog is about $20. A beer is $20. Everything is $10 to $20. So, you're looking at $600 or $700 of cost, not to mention, gas, parking, all of these things. So it's becoming very expensive very quickly. And, hopefully there'll be some new revenue streams that some of these leagues and teams can access locally and nationally and internationally to be able to maintain pricing levels that, are not cost prohibitive. But that's, again, I have mixed feelings on this, but, I think we all feel the same way. I think the leagues probably feel the same way.
Yeah, the reach component of that conversation is a really important one because we've seen in other places that sports fandom has waned as sports has become less accessible, particularly in markets like UK and Europe, where pay TV really dominated the premium rights space for so many years now. So I think your point is very valid and something that, fortunately, the NFL many years ago took the appropriate provisions to keep a lot of their games mandated as free to air, but that seems to be blurring more and more as we go into this new era of streaming.
Yeah, well, there's one thing on that is that, and one thing we should really track closely is OTA, right? Over the air. As you said, those are free broadcasts. Americans typically don't use antennas. I know it's more popular in Europe, particularly I think Germany is one of the most penetrated OTA markets in the Western world. But, it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on that to see, are people planning to switch to OTA to be able to access sports? And when I say sports, it's not just the NFL. We're talking about any premium sports. And just to be clear, not picking on any one league, you have the World Series, you have the Olympics, you have the World Cup, you have, NFL, college football, NBA playoffs. So you have, lots of premium sports that, are available over the air. And it's going to be interesting to see if the cost becomes so prohibitive that people are starting to switch to OTA. So it's something for you to keep an eye on.
Well, one of the reasons OTA has been so successful at holding on to premium sports is the success of advertising, the advertising marketplace. Right. Obviously, David, your background history was in the advertising game, yep. And has been, the US is the sort of the leading light, the leading marketplace for advertising success in these markets. Streaming is obviously opening up a whole new, I believe, and I've been waxing lyrical about this, that it's got a huge opportunity to help bring more revenue to the live sports space, because as we've gone through this transition with streaming, a lot of it's gone behind paywalls and subscription products, and that does not help the advertising game. But we've seen that advertising can be a lucrative sector if done right and for the right sports. you've invested in with Fubo of creating new ad formats on the platform. You show the advertising revenue impact you're having on a per subscriber basis. If I remember correctly, it's around 30% or so, or 25% of revenue on a per
No,
subscription
it's actually
subscriber base.
lower. I think it's probably between as of the last quarter, I want to say between 7 and 10%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll fact check myself next time.
yeah.
But nevertheless, that 10%
But that's
on
the right
top makes a
target, by
big
the way.
difference. Yeah, that's absolutely so. But that is the impact that advertising can have. It can make the difference between a loss making exercise and a profitable exercise
Correct.
when you're working on such fine margins. Just talk me through what you're doing on the ad side and how you're seeing that grow. Is that because also you're getting a conflicting message around advertising more generally, that the market is a bit, just generally the advertising market is flattening in terms of its overall spend, but
Yep.
streaming and live sports seems to be a new opportunity that is still only at its early stages of maximizing.
Yeah, look, I think there's been a lot of inventory that has come, I'll call it online, meaning become accessible very quickly. You have companies like Amazon and Netflix, and you have, other subscription services that were ad free that have now also decided to create an ad tier. And so the market's been flooded with new inventory. And that inventory, I would say, in a very defensive market, everyone's been worried about a recession and a soft landing or hard landing. And so I think marketers have been a little bit more defensive. I think that that inventory has to work through the system at some point. And at that point, I believe the market will start to grow again. Yes, of course, you're seeing a shift from television to streaming, and that shift is about 20% or so, in terms of growth for streaming relative to TV. But I think overall, you have the bigger guys that are sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the room, the Amazons so I think that it'll take a little bit of time, but you're right, sports is an area where the halo effect and the brand awareness is very strong around sports, right? People feel very positive about ads tied to sports team. I think there's an affinity towards brands that are if you're a Chelsea fan, for instance, and somebody sponsors Chelsea, I think there's probably a propensity to consume that product if you're given the choice. So I do believe that it will have a tremendous impact, and I think brand recall is another area that I think really benefits from sports. I think that very few people, we can just do a quick focus group here, the two of us. I'm sure you've visited YouTube proper, meaning the free service. And, as have I, maybe I've accessed it 5-10 times this month. I cannot tell you one ad that I saw on YouTube. I cannot remember one single thing. Do I remember a Walmart ad on Fubo? Absolutely. Do I remember a Cadillac ad on Fubo or GM or absolutely. So I think that there's clear value in the type of customer that we're offering advertisers, which has very high discretionary income, but is very tech savvy. And at the same time, we're able to put those ads in programming or near programming or adjacent to that type of programming where recall is high. So yes, I think over time, you are correct. We should see a continued growth in ads, which can also allow us to moderate pricing. Obviously, if we were 50% ads, that would be amazing because then we wouldn't have to raise pricing. So, but that's sort of the goal, and we're going to continue to look for ways in which we can improve our ad stack, our ad capabilities, and try and be a little bit more innovative from a format perspective.
So what was the new format that you've launched that you're running specifically? What's some of the differences you're offering in that versus what you've been offering in the past to advertisers?
So I think, we have, just like Roku has a homepage, we have a homepage, we have different sections of our app. And so I think there's ways in which that we have carousels that we can, sort of highlight programming that is relevant to a particular time period. So I'll make this up. Let's say it's Easter and there's an advertiser that likes or has some Easter products or has some sales tied to Easter. Maybe there's Easter movies that will be there for them to view, or maybe there's sporting events that are, let's say there's a Thanksgiving weekend and there's like 40 or 50 different sporting events. Or maybe in this UK case where you have Boxing Day, that's in the middle of holidays where people are shopping. So there's different ways in which they can do that, but really leveraging our real estate whether it's through email or the streaming platform itself, creating new banners that all are programmatic, which is nice, so we can schedule them quickly. And so there's a lot of that, and we're trying to couple that with data from like TransUnion. So we're just continuing to kind of develop ways in which where advertisers can actually follow the success of their campaigns and track the success of those campaigns, which will depend on sort of what type of goals they sell, whether it's sales goals, click goals, or any of that.
So one of the things I'm curious on, and I'm not sure what you can share on this, but just what are some of the things the advertisers on a macro level at least are looking for from you when they're advertising? Are they looking for just consumption data or engagement data, looking for demographic data of insight of who's consuming their content? What are you able to give them in terms of an insight as to who's consuming their ads?
Yeah, so we give them a lot of information. This is why you've seen many. I mean, it runs the gamut. So everyone is very different. We've got hundreds and hundreds of advertisers at this point. Every campaign is unique, but the idea is as you see our press releases come out, we're partnering with more and more, data platforms to be able to provide the type of data and targeting that advertisers are looking for. So these programs are, in many cases discrete. And so, but again, it's really about the beauty of what we do is we have a subscription service that's heavily predicated on sports programming. And, we can look at the viewing behavior of a customer. So for instance, let's say you wanted to target somebody in the NFL, like I'm making this up. And, maybe an NFL spot's very expensive. And so maybe you say, okay, well, I'll buy one spot in the NFL, from a broadcaster, and then Fubo can track that viewer, and then I can buy them at a quarter of the price on some other channel. And so maybe so you get your first impression on the NFL, and then impressions, let's say 2, 3, and 4, you can dollar cost average down for your frequency. So there's ways in which that it plays out, and I think that marketers are getting much better, much smarter at it. I mean, look at Fubo. I mean, we're probably the masters of targeting for our service, because we, as you may have seen, I think as of the last quarter, 9% of our budget, 9% of revenue was spent on marketing. That is the lowest marketing budget, I think, of any. I mean, you look at Spotify, I think it's like 15, 16, 17, 18%. Roku, I think theirs is more of like an R&D line, which is like 20 to 25%. So we're extremely, extremely efficient at targeting. And, I think most marketers are starting to catch up to that as well.
One of the things we're seeing at a more international scale, David, is that a lot of the big tech companies, I think it's also happening in the US, but I think it's particularly prevalent in international markets where there's less competition, is that big tech companies are now trying to become aggregators themselves. So Amazon is really leading that charge. I mean, we've seen the big announcements they've made with securing NBA rights and the NFL Thursday Night Football, but actually that's the exception rather than the rule. They're actually stepping away from some other rights and trying to do more partnerships. And we're also seeing across the industry more mergers, more discussions and rumors about different acquisitions and things happening, and just generally more partnerships between organizations to increase distribution and sort of almost take the competitive edge out of the market a little bit when it comes to fighting for subscribers and fighting for some of those premium, perhaps sports rights in some of those markets. What's your view on just that landscape of, I mean, putting the Venu stuff to the side a little bit more in more general terms, what you see happening in terms of whether the partnerships that are happening between platforms and programmers and distribution channels and this sort of inertia around potentially a lot more merger and acquisition activity that seems to be becoming more and more talked about in the marketplace?
Well, look, I think I said this many years ago when Facebook acquired La Liga rights in India, and then when they acquired baseball rights in the United States. It doesn't make any sense. These companies are already fully distributed, right? I mean, how many Apple phones are there in the United States and in the world, right? What is Amazon's reach? I think that it doesn't make sense for them to acquire these rights when they're charging a tax. They're charging a tax. The programming will end up on their platforms anyway. So it makes little sense. It's probably why you've seen in some European countries, they're like, well, why are we doing this? It makes no sense, right? And so I think that, in local markets, like I said, Sky would probably have greater value for the EPL in the UK than they would in acquiring it in any other country. Telefonica will have more value and willing to pay more to acquire, La Liga rights in Spain than anybody else. So you're not going to be able to buy, in my view, a lot of these rights globally, just because there are certain markets where there's always a player who has more value for that piece of programming. So I just don't see how that gets sold. Like I don't see a major technology company buying the EPL for $10 billion. So I do believe it's going to remain more regional. I don't want to say local, but you'll see like in the MENA region. Obviously, if you're, BN or one of these companies, you're obviously going to have more value for having that sports programming and lock that in your region. So I think you'll see a lot more of that. I think the big tech guys will probably step away at some point. I'm not sure how much value they get out of it. It's been a race. I mean, you've seen this. I mean, stock prices have really compressed and they're under significant pressure. Valuations are coming down. Everyone says our valuation's down, but you look across media, it's down 50, 60, 70%. And because, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. With respect to M&A, you can talk about it as much as you want. A lot of companies are, highly levered. And I think it's tough for shareholders, boards to make decisions today. And I think there's a lack of visibility and clarity as to where the industry is going. So, I'll give you one example. So in the entertainment space, production companies just don't make money anymore. The model that Netflix started was this cost plus model that everyone's moved to. And what that means for your listener is that there's a cost to produce a show and there's some kind of rate that you pay above that, but there's no more of these back end deals that we see. So lots of things are changing. Now, my view is that eventually you'll see a rebalancing where, I said this many years ago, I think in 20, when everyone was talking about unbundling, I was saying we've gone from bundling to unbundling to rebundling. You've heard me say that many times. And here we are again, rebundling. So I do believe everything is cyclical, particularly in our business. It's going to be very important for us to bring back windowing and, distribution and all of that. I think that's going to happen. I just think companies need to realize that there's only one Netflix. And you're never going to get the valuation that Netflix gets. And by the way, you see this in every industry. If General Motors or Ford or somebody said, you know what, I'm going to go 100% EV, you're not going to be a $1 trillion company like Tesla. That's Tesla. So, it's just not going to happen. So I think as everyone kind of rationalizes their business and starts, as you said, focus on profitability, maybe there's some M&A opportunities down the road, 18, 24 months out, maybe a little further, depending on how long this shakeout happens. But, I think that everything's going to happen on a regional basis.
So two questions I want to wrap up on, David. One is that we've seen obviously a huge amount of going on in the RSN space around localized rights.
Yep.
Now we're even hearing stories that NBA and MLB are now even more serious about considering having more domestic and localized regional rights on their platforms because they're struggling to get the deals that they have historically gotten from RSNs. Just what's your view on, is there any knock-on benefits perhaps for Fubo there, whether it be striking deals with the NBA and MLB if they would take that approach, or are you seeing that RSNs might be, from a cost perspective, coming down for you because obviously you have various partnerships in place with a number of RSNs?
Yeah. Well, look, we have been highly exposed to sports. We maintain our position in sports. Regional sports networks for avid fans, in my view, are important. And, we're doing our best to work with the leagues. And, in some cases where there are some disputes, in certain DMAs, we look to do deals direct. But, again, we're a distributor, so we want to go where the content is. But I do believe that it's important, for these RSNs to be available both on subscription services and over the air. The problem is that it's cannibalistic on both sides. So, I think ideally what you want to do is you want to be able, if you want OTA for your local games, then it should be OTA that is also delivered through subscription platforms. And MVPDs and virtual MVPDs like us, because you want to get the best of both worlds, right? You don't want just OTA because you still have to make money. And I think what we've seen, and again, I said this when we went public back in 2020, the best model in media is a model that affords companies the chance to collect subscription revenue and ads. I think I have been very clear on that point for 5 years. I'm glad that others now have accepted this, and everyone wants a piece of this. So I think just being on some OTA channel and some DMA is not going to deliver anything close on a revenue share basis in particular. Is not going to deliver anything close that these teams or even the league is used to seeing. So it has to be some combination. I think the RSN model can work, but obviously everything has to be measured, and you can't just kind of charge people what has been the case in the past. So I think expectations have to come down a little bit. And the data's there, as you know, Nick, right? The data's there. That's the beauty of this industry, is that we can see exactly what a sub is worth. And we know how many subs we can get, and we know how many subs we'll watch, and we can calculate their LTV. I think that's what's changing in sports, is that, particularly for second tier and third tier, is that you know exactly what something's worth. Whereas in the past, you just knew that people liked it. You just didn't know, what you should pay for it. Obviously, you wanted to pay more because you wanted it. But today, I think, and going forward, people are going to be very detail-oriented around what is the value. And again, why is this good for consumers? Because now the second and third tier leagues are going to have to pick up their game. They're going to have to, improve governance. They may have to improve formats. They may have to, have salary caps and, drafts and things that maybe we're not used to in some of these leagues. But, they can't continue down the current path because those rates will come down. So again, all of this is good for consumers.
Certainly good for consumers. We're seeing a lot of challenges for tier 2, tier 3 sports across the world now because of that push that you're referring to. So innovation is needed, not just on the formats, but indeed the monetization approach, because following a traditional media rights model is definitely not working for those organizations. David, just the final question really for you is back to the wider Fubo business. So how's the business performing in your view? Obviously, there's a lot going on, as we've talked about. You come out with your latest numbers last month, I believe, off the top of my head. Yep. And the next numbers will be out in a couple of months' time or thereabouts, just under. How's the business performing for you? Are there any headwinds you're facing with regards to your positioning of what your goals are, or are you still on track?
So look, we, unlike many companies that are public, we provided a forecast back in 2022. We have never changed that forecast, right? We've said we were going to be profitable in 2025, which is a very, very difficult thing to do for two reasons. One, we're basically still a startup, right? Spotify is 22 years old, Netflix 23, 24, Roku 20 in its 20s. So we are not even 10 yet. So we are kind of still early, and to be able to continue to maintain our forecast for the sort of over a 3-year period, I think we just have not gotten a lot of credibility and respect for that. But we've maintained that so far. Obviously, I can't speak to Q3. What I can speak is to more the macro of Q3, that it's extremely competitive. You have the NFL is marketing its mobile product. You've got, just taking the NFL, everyone is marketing the NFL. So you have Sunday tickets and NFL mobile, and you have, people are spending a lot of money doing that. And, there's heavy discounting that's happening in, this month. And so, I feel good about where we are. Our goal is to achieve profitability. Now, some people will say, oh, but in your guidance, you've lowered your growth rate, or your growth rate has declined. It has declined because we are optimizing for profitability, not growth. And because subscriber models are very costly, you have to invest heavily up front, and then you benefit from the annuity that comes on the back end over time. So, we're trying to achieve that goal that we set for ourselves in 25, and therefore, we're trying to kind of balance growth with profitability. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So, again, I feel pretty good so far. I guess we'll have to see how the quarter ends. Remember, season's just started, so a lot of that data is going to become available in the coming weeks. But, team is very focused, and I think we're happy to have that PI behind us. But now the hard work begins, because the trial is October 8th, as I said, and We have to focus both on the business as well as preparing our arguments. I'm sure the defendants are going to go at us 110% now, and I look forward to a very strong battle, and I don't anticipate to lose, because that's not what we do here at Fubo.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, David, for your time, sharing insight into the Fubo business, the Venu Sports injunction, and indeed a wider look at the industry. Really enjoyed talking to you as always, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review, and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsProNick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.